Welcome to Earworm, episode 9. Today we're going to talk about amplifiers and tubes and sounds in Nashville.
And transformers and cars. And we won't talk about
Star Wars.
Did you hear that?
I am from black tape, going in my road cave. Tour date sounds great. Earworm stuck in my mind, can't get it out this time.
Okay, so we have for you as our guest. By the way, we have a long-standing tradition of one episode on our podcast that all of our guests from here on out are going to be referred to as Gregs.
In tribute to our first guest.
But we decided, you know what? Let's just call everybody Greg as a temporary holding point for, I think, the shortened version of gregarious personality.
Yeah, so our Greg this week.
Our Greg this week is John Capito, who is a guru of amplification and design here in Nashville. He is one of my favorite techs in the world, and he knows way more about amps than I will ever pretend to know. So that
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Man, we're so glad that you could do this with us. Okay, let's talk about amplifiers, but first, I just want you to kind of give people a background, because getting into working and designing and helping other clients come up with their dream tone and all the amazing rabbit holes that you go down is not something that generally people, I think of when they first get out of bed in the morning and go, you know what, I think I want to do that for a living. And you have such a diverse background. Just give people a little bit of a background. I mean, where are you from? Where'd you start out?
Well, I've mostly lived in Tennessee my whole life. Oh, East Tennessee. I think that's kind of a different state. And in my past life, I was a car technician, mostly with BMW. And it was an accident. I was always really interested in this, but I hurt my shoulder one morning at the gym. And when I was on break, my friend who was the guitar player I was playing with broke his Laney broke. And at lunch, I would often go over to Joe Glazer's wearing my BMW uniform. Mm-hmm. He would often want to talk about cars. And I said, you know, who do you recommend I take my amp to? At the time, Ferg was right next to him. I said, I'd really like to maybe learn something from them. And he thought carefully, like Joe does, and he said Kai Kennedy.
Right. And
so I took the Laney to Kai, and he fixed it quickly. And I basically, had some time while I was recovering and said, do you ever take interns? Is there any chance, I could work with that? And he said, well, I want you to go make me 50 instrument cables. And I think he thought he would never see me again. I brought in 100, and 100 of them were made wrong. So I had to redo that. But ultimately, it started with a jump. It was right at a time when there's a lot of changes in the automotive industry. It was right in after the financial crisis.
Yep.
I was
2008.
Yeah, I was. It was. I guess it was a little after that, but It was a longer recovery.
Yeah.
And I'd always been interested in this. Starting to think about a change. Starting to think about a very physical job, and then you have an injury, you start to think about the longevity of your career. Mm-hmm. And then things just kind of took off. There's actually a legitimate Star Wars reference in here, but Kai would say, the Force is strong with this one. And I don't know if he was right, but I thought I could weave in a Star Wars reference.
Hell yeah.
Pass that up,
Yes, okay.
And it wasn't even forced.
We'll have a little Star Wars reference counter in this episode.
Did you hear that?
So, okay, but I got a question. What's a Laney for those people who don't know?
A Laney is similar to it's a British amp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say it's essentially a cousin to a Marshall. If you're talking about an original Laney, which I'm lucky enough to have had 2 in just this year.
Yeah.
So really close. You know the Swedish guy who does the really cool amp reviews on YouTube? I can't say his name, so I'm not going to try.
Okay.
He has a great comparison of, I think, the same year of a Plexi and a Laney. If you want to hear the super group, which is like the Tony, Yami, it's really close. the tone's really similar. The only differences are, really small parts values, pretty much.
Okay.
So if you've heard of Plexi, you're 95% of the way there of a real Laney.
Right.
Yeah.
What's a Plexi?
What's a hypotenuse?
But yeah, so for those of you who are going, what are these guitar nerds talking about? Plexi, we're talking about a very specific model of Marshall head that usually started off as a JTM 45, and it was a 45-watt head, and it was based off of, theoretically, legend has it, an old Bassman schematic, but it used to have a plexiglass control panel underneath where the knobs were attached to, and then it eventually became brushed metal later, and that's the era that we're talking about.
Many important recordings
Yeah.
done on Plexi amplifiers.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. I mean, that's what started the whole high gain.
I would go as far as to say that the Tweed Bassman is the guitar amp. I was trying to explain to someone, like I usually do, make a car analogy, and there's not even a car analogy because somehow it's like the Model T and the Mustang and the Jeep all in one.
Right.
To make try to make a car analogy. So the 59 Bassman is the guitar amp.
Yeah.
And the Marshall was essentially because of a chicken tariff, is what I understand. They couldn't get those amps over in the UK, so they started building. He was building them in his kitchen and copying the circuit as best he could, making some mistakes, but using different transformers and the tubes they could get there. So it ended up having a different sound, and then it began its own path and evolved with its own different cabinets, and it became its own thing. But with some exceptions, you can trace almost any modern amp tone back to that Bassman and thus the Marshall. So it doesn't have to be high gain, really.
Where does the AC30 fall into those categories? Is it a clone of a Bassman, or is it a parts Plexi, or
I'd say that's another archetype.
Okay,
and it actually predates all of those because I think the oldest one I've seen is 1960.
Yeah.
Most of them are a little later than that. So yeah, Vox is its own thing. I mean, technically, if you're going to go to England, there are a few. Matamp, which is a company, MATAMP. They were building the original orange amps. I can't think of Mattias, maybe, the guy who started that. And that is a very unique circuit, right?
And then you had Selmer, which was Britain's oldest band, or brand, I should say.
Is that the oldest one?
That was the oldest brand of existing amps pre-Marshall. So it was like Selmer was the oldest, and then you had Vox. And then Marshall came onto the scene in the timeline.
For the music fans that are listening, what would you associate? Let's give me one association from each of those archetypes in a band that used them.
Well, the Beatles for Vox.
Right?
Yeah. But I would argue that the Beatles sound for Vox is a little decoupled from the if you ever get a real AC30 that's healthy and get to crank it up, there's not a ton of chime. Not working this in just two. This is the example I use, is an AC30 cranked is kind of like a lightsaber.
Did you hear that?
Okay.
This is just happening organically, I promise. Yeah. But it is, you could do layovers with, modern metal with an AC30. Or many of the ones I've heard.
Interesting.
So it's definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
All right. So where would what band would represent what a Plexi sounds like?
Oh, God. I mean, that's...
Just one.
Well,
you got to go one.
Hold
it down.
Clapton.
Yeah.
Blues Breakers.
And what about the Bassman?
The Tweed Bassman.
So many. But Freddie King would be one. The early recordings, that's all 59 Bassman.
And then the orange amp, is that Black Sabbath? I mean, where's the association?
But Black Sabbath is famously associated with them because of some talk show or something that they were on, and in the video for it they're using orange amps, but my understanding is it was
or Laney
with the Laney,
but
with the orange
in the ad,
whatever the video or whatever it was from the equivalent of Johnny Carson, I guess, or something from the era. And so people, including myself, when I was younger, I associated orange with Black Sabbath.
I just remember that psychedelic video.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But apparently that's like most videos. not
It's just
what you're hearing.
performative, right?
Yeah,
They're
that's my
not
understanding.
actually playing. It's okay.
It's actually Laney is probably more of what you're hearing. And by the way, I think it's probably important to say that a lot of these amps that we associate with people probably are more connected to what we see on stage or in videos, and more, you can tell us more than anyone else, of what actually ends up on a track that we've listened to in our car for 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Can be very different devices and gear.
It seems like England was. Were they more ahead of the amplifier game than the States were? Like, were the guitar country and they were pushing amps forward? Because it seems like in that era, all you had was Fender in America.
Yeah.
And then you have all of these other various brands in England.
I don't know the answer to that. I think maybe it's that some of those brands continued on to we know them. I mean, I see a lot of small, cheap American amps from the time that I don't always know what they are. A lot of companies
Like Silvertone and stuff
yeah,
like that.
there was a company called Valco.
Yeah. Wow.
And so they made amps. I can see, I can think of a Harmony 420, Supro Thunderbolt, and an Airline, some numbers. It's the same amp inside.
Right.
And so they'd go to like that. Isn't there
That's
a
classic
Korean,
Valco. Yeah.
a Korean guitar factory
Yeah.
that makes guitars for all kinds of
Yeah.
companies?
Like a Samick
Yeah.
or a Court
Yeah.
brand
yeah.
factory.
So
Where they make a Squire there and they make a, whatever.
the same production line even.
Yeah. They just stamp a different brand name.
Different. Pick out your Tolex and your faceplate, and so I honestly don't know how to answer that. If it's just that there were more and they survived, or maybe the nature of the economy in England. I think of cars. I think it might have the date wrong, but like the beginning of the 20th century, there were over 100 car companies in the UK. Right, so a lot more small builders taking their designs in very different directions. Maybe here we were more thinking like Ford, so big production. That's a good question. I don't feel like I can answer that and be really confident I'm giving you the
Sure.
right
I just think
information.
about Gibson, like they had Gibson amplifiers for a while,
Yeah.
Which
but
for a
those got
while-
discontinued.
Right.
There's
pretty
a lot
quickly,
of eras, and there was a period where they're being made by Valco.
Okay.
Yeah. I think whoever Gibson, when they were looking for people to build their amps, and Vox too throughout the years, and they were like, this is not good enough, or this is too good, right? We have a reputation to uphold of being poorly built. So we're going to find someone else to build this who can build it crappy.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and we had Ampeg here. So
Yeah, that's true.
And Ernie Ball,
Right.
the Music Man amplifiers as well.
A little bit later, yeah.
Yeah. But Ampeg was a little bit earlier, so that would be kind of in the same sort of graduating class, if you will,
Yeah.
of the early days. We're thinking now late 50s, early to late 60s, right? Not the early days where, some of the other brands that you mentioned were more popular and more just available. Because if you think about the early recordings with Charlie Christian or whatever, I mean, what amp was he playing through? Most people couldn't tell you. I can't tell you. I don't know.
Right. So, did you take apart your toys when you were a kid? Was that a?
I
I
did.
don't know if what
yeah.
was you got like the mind for it. I just wonder. I used to take apart my toys and put them back together very poorly. I might add, but
Never my G.I. Joes. I took very good care of those because then when I was older, I was able to sell them on eBay and buy my music gear.
Oh, very
Thank
good.
Goodness I've taken care of them.
Right on.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. A lot of it was not, well, I listened to music growing up, kind of grew up in car dealerships, and there's always a radio on. Loved listening to classic rock, and then having friends who are musicians. My sister's a extremely talented musician. And so this was always like an interest in the back of my mind. And then even when I did go to college and started in mechanical engineering, but in the back of my mind, I wanted to maybe, should I do electrical? Because if something ever, at least as a hobby, at least I can learn more about amps and tube technology. But basically the way it ended up happening was how I described to you, of this kind of chance event where I had an injury, one lemon turned into lemonade, and things just happened really quickly at the right time and ended up here. I think anyone who is super interested in something it's a lot easier to devote a lot more of your time and attention to it if it's something that you're passionate about or really just willing to spend the time because you're interested.
Right on.
Yeah. And I had a great person like Kai who was very good at, there's a lot of really genius technical people
Right.
who cannot communicate what they know, right? It's an important nuance. And Kai was very, very good at transferring information.
Well, and I think that transfer of information, but also holding you accountable or giving you a task. Like, you told the story earlier, to us about the guy at the BMW. Relay that story, because that kind of feedback is sorely not in vogue anymore. Like, no one wants to hear just the real honest truth. You know what I mean about it.
Well, there's, I would say, famous field service engineer who worked for BMW back in the old days when it became an American company. He looked kind of like Einstein with white hair and an actual genius, probably.
Right.
But so I'm the new young technician. We have our new big fancy computer, which was actually big. It had to be.
Right.
And I'm working on a car standing on the screen, and I probably just wanted an excuse to talk to him. I was like, tapping on the touch screen, which was new, and I'm not really sure what's going on here. And he walks up and looks at the screen and points to it and says, "Oh, the problem is you don't know what the fuck you're doing." I was crushed. But now it's a great story.
I mean, like you said, you can instantly appreciate that level of honesty because your growth rate just skyrockets when someone just goes, "Nope, not happening."
Here's the deep end.
Yeah, swim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we'll bail you out when you hit the bottom.
Yeah.
I love it.
And for a legend to just look at you and just be like,
Yeah.
you're
The
the problem.
Yes,
here.
exactly right. Exactly right. I love the accountability. So when you decided to move to Nashville, and you mentioned Joe Glazer, who's a for those of you who don't know Glazer Instruments, Glazer works on pretty much everybody in the world's major players' guitars, keeps them in perfect playing condition, has a Plexi machine like a lot of other people do now, but back then it was very rare. And but he's just such an encyclopedic human being and knows so many things about so many people, their music career, their taste, their whole thing. I mean, he's just a walking treasure trove. But so he recommends you to go with Kai Kennedy. You start getting into it. When was it that you go, "I love this"? And what was the first project that you came across to you that you were totally excited about? That you go, "This is amazing"?
It was all exciting immediately. And Kai created an environment that was very productive for me. He was very supportive. And I think that as I began to, just like any other person who's, been a sort of apprentice, gradually you ask fewer and fewer questions and you're given more responsibility and more tasks to the point of, here's a job, do it, bring it back, or work at the other bench, to get it done. And then at some point, I remember Jack White had come in and I think this was the beginning of his solo career post White Stripes, somewhere around that. Jack and Josh came in, and he had found these RCA amps that were, maybe one of them worked, and had a plan for them. And basically, Kai had cultivated this large customer group, and at the time, Jack was younger and a newer person to Nashville. This is a different Nashville at this time. It's kind of hard to remember now in 2026. And, he's younger. You probably understand the language better. Here's a good project. And if I remember correctly, he even said, like, here, take this and build something with this. Not only literally the amp, but a career. Mm-hmm. And that, along with Moose Brown, who is a songwriter, multi-musician, artist, and then right at the time he was the rhythm player with Bob Seger and his music director. Mm. And so Jerry Mack, Moose, and Jack, and doing amps for them or working with them, an amp I built that Jerry used, and then for Moose. And that just kind of springboarded things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my friends were mechanics, so I moved in to a corner of my friend's hot rod shop.
Yeah, dude, I remember this shop so well.
Yeah, and and things started happening. Looking back now, that was total 3-point from half court of just snowball of good luck, and everything. The stars were just aligned. Yep. But things began to speed up, move into a bigger shop, and Third Avenue. Eventually, people were working with me or for me, however you want to look at it, and extremely exciting time. And things just kept growing. I feel like there's a story about Vox that you probably know about them kind of growing too fast. So there were some mistakes I made where, I really wanted to build amps. I wanted to try and do new things. Because one thing that's a little heartbreaking to me is seeing, in a way, I see this a little differently today. There's not a ton of innovation in amp circuits, really. I mean, for a good reason, because it's hard to beat that 59 Bassman, right? There's a reason it's so good. But, that and the blackface era, like mid-60s Fenders, those are the main archetype of circuit that is in 95% of circuits out there, even today.
Right.
We're just doing that with one small tweak or adjustment. And I really wanted to, make a difference in the world or whatever, bring something new, help artists. As someone who's not a good musician but loves music, it's a way to participate and contribute to something that I love in a way that I actually can contribute instead of making people suffer through, my playing. So maybe a mistake that happened was maybe growing too fast, not being able to say no. At one point, I was doing repairs for, if you remember, Rock Block.
Yeah.
And then for a while, also EMS. We're doing some of the repairs for Groons.
Right.
And it was a lot. So I wasn't able to do as much building. Also, I was younger, I had so much more energy.
Yeah.
I could pull off 12-hour days all week, like that. And things pivoted heavily going into 2020 for some reason.
Right.
So there's a lot of life events happening at that time. And
What did you call it? The COVID carnival?
the COVID carnival,
Yeah, that's
it was
great.
definitely a time. And then some personal stuff going on at the same time. So kind of a hard reset.
Yeah.
But now that I'm a little bit older and really appreciate, honestly, how lucky I was, and hopefully can learn from some mistakes I made, have some wisdom to hopefully offset the lack of energy. But it is, it's still just as interesting to me today as it was when I first started working with Kai. Or I would argue even more so. I still sit with a coffee table that is covered with schematics and graph paper, where I'm either just doodling out a schematic of an amp that's was built over half century ago, or my own ideas or something. So it's still new to me. And there's always, one of the things I loved about BMW was you're constantly going to school. There's constantly new models. I was hanging out with a friend last weekend who's the foreman at the BMW store in Cool Springs. And oh my gosh, all the stuff he's telling me about the stuff they're doing now. And I miss that. It's kind of the same thing going backwards in time instead of forwards. You find some other old book
Right.
that hasn't been checked out of a library since the 70s, or you manage to make a new friend. Frank DeSalvo is a technician in Orange County, and I've recently been talking to him, and I see this strange circuit on an old Marshall, and he's like, I can text him, and he's like, oh, bro, that's what this is.
Right.
Or Mitch Colby, who worked for Marshall. And there's this little part of a master volume, and it's been bugging me for years. And then finally I'm able to connect with him and say, hey, man, what is this?
Right.
He's like, I've never noticed that. I don't know. But I know the guy who designed it in the 80s. And then you get these answers. So although going backwards in time, still getting really exciting new things to learn constantly,
Yeah.
or looking at something in a new way. We're talking about transformers and tubes. Just when you think you really understand it, you build something, you measure the power output or something, it doesn't behave quite like you thought, and you realize there's still some stuff to learn here. or unpredictable results. The way it sounds, the way it performs, the way it doesn't work. Right. So
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you think that just like music trends and the way that people are making music now has stifled innovation in a way where it's like, or what are the things maybe that stifle innovation going forward? Like we were talking about BMW and they have all this innovation, all these new cars and all these new concepts every year, but everything that you're learning is going to the history to see it. What are the things do you think maybe that are holding back progress in the field?
That's a good question. And one of the things that, you and I had talked about a couple of days ago was, what is the future for amps? Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, you have this, if it's the right word, is dogmatic approach where we kind of just want the same thing. And you can imagine the car industry where we had 40 years of just making a 69 Mustang again. Like no new car. No, this one's more like the old one, right? That'd be a weird industry if you put that paradigm in this other setting.
Sure.
It stands out as how weird it is, right? Yeah. But then there are new things. Just shooting from the hip, I'll say like the CAE amps are really a lot of Zinke stuff can be really interesting and new. But then sometimes what they face is the dogma of a consumer base that doesn't want that. The amp that I built for Jerry Mac back then, what I love about that amp is I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. I was trying to copy an amp that I'd only read about and didn't have the schematic. And it is a truly unique circuit. But it's really hard to pitch that, especially today when you're selling amps online, right? So they can't try it first. And all they have is what they know about what they've read. So the obstacles are complicated because if people have finite amount of money and time, they don't get to play every amp in the world at work that has a warehouse of multiple of every amp like you have. So all you really can go off of is what I associate with an artist I love or a sound. Also, when I worked at Sears Point, I would go to a lecture by a really famous race car engineer named Carroll Smith. And one time he said something that I still think about all the time. He said, if 1 in 100 of your experiments works, you're doing really good.
Right.
And that's overwhelming to think about. Like that's a huge attrition rate, right?
Yeah.
So do we have the time, the resources to make 100 variations of a circuit or try something new? And then on top of that, how do you get it out there for people to try and truly prove it in a field that's very subjective? You know?
The market demand is an interesting thing when you had mentioned about how it's mostly solid state and non-tube amplifiers that are being sold these days.
Yeah, even the past couple of years, you check my numbers, but only one of the top 20 amps selling on Reverb.com has been a tube amp. Right, of the new amp sales. There's economic reasons for that.
Sure.
We've had a tough time, especially here recently for tubes. It's been a real roller coaster of being able to get them at all, let alone at any price.
Yeah.
So there's a reason we went to solid state, right? It's so much smaller, so much cheaper, so much more reliable. A tube has to be heated up before it even begins conducting, and a transformer works at room temperature. So, and like we talked about, especially when you add in software, there's a lot of people confuse solid state and analog, or it's a digital and analog and solid state and tube. And those can make a 4-way matrix, right?
Yeah.
You think of the ENIAC, it's a tube digital machine.
Yep.
Right?
It was, yeah.
And your Altec over there is a solid state analog machine. Just because of the way history played out, there aren't many digital vacuum tube devices, right? And so just wanted to throw that out because I feel like it's important more people understand that.
Well, I think the tube thing is very fascinating. Just to think about that there's only really a couple of factories that are still actively making tubes, none in the U.S., so obviously it makes it harder to get parts to be able to develop things even. When I think about trying to innovate, it's like, do we even have do we even have the parts to innovate with?
Well,
You know?
I
So-
think the labor would be too expensive. Plus, you know what I mean? Because we ran into that crunch when, of course, when the COVID carnival started, there was this huge tube shortage for guitar amps.
And then 22 with the war in Ukraine. It was just a bunch of slow rolling problems that all collided at the same time. So the initial tariff waves beginning in 2018, 2019, that put a crunch on the Chinese plant, the large plant making tubes. Then the COVID hits, would hit China really hard, right?
Yep.
So then 2022, the war in Ukraine, and Putin bans the export of tubes. Because, Putin doesn't
not only
know.
tubes, obviously.
He
pretty
knows
much
over
everything.
100
Whereas-
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
but-
hear he has a lot of Marshalls, and he wants.
He
He's
doesn't
supposed to
know
keep 'em all for
anything
himself.
about good guitar tone. Yeah. So that happened. So it was literally. I remember talking to Buster Allen, and he's out. It was like literally a panic, and he's out buying tubes, and he's like, "Hey man, you should too." And I think I'd mentioned to you at one point towards the end of 2022, I was considering going to Guitar Center and buying some used amps they had just to get the tubes out of them.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'd been kind of a hoarder. And so I had boxes of tubes. I kind of built my own tester and spent a lot of that slower time where I was kind of going through some personal stuff too. Had moved to a more remote shop location, began testing a lot of tubes. And that's where I really started to think about, as far as thinking about looking into the future, it's not really sure where to begin talking about this. But recently, anyone who has access to the internet, if you can use your parents' dial-up, check out Vacuum Tube Valley. I actually used to get that as a newsletter when I was younger, and I was nowhere in the place to understand it or appreciate it. But now it's all digital online. You can read these really interesting articles in there about tubes and tube development and their history, because there's a huge lack of information about, if you're like me and you've got boxes of old tubes and you don't always know what they are, and then what's printed on the glass adds another variable, because that can be very different than what's in. I have one tube that says made in England. It was made in China as a clone ripoff of a Russian tube, right?
Okay.
Really complicated. So then, and then
unpack.
yeah, right. So then, and there's different eras of forces at work of production, right? But relabeling began. Is my understanding, like Rich Barber, I think, is one of the articles where he said this. As early as the 30s, this began to happen. So there was confusion. And what I think is really interesting is if you look at Kenrad, Kentucky Radio, GE, RCA, Tungsol, there was a lot of cross working. If you could imagine like Ford and Chevrolet working together.
Right.
Ford's like, we'll build your Cavalier and you can put your name on it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
So what is made where? Sylvania, if I get the order of this right, Sylvania sold their factory in Pennsylvania to Philips. So you'll see the color of the ink change to the Philips ink. Then it says Philips, but it's the same tube. And then it might get sold to PV and have yet another label.
Right.
But ultimately,
Wait, did you just mention PV?
yeah.
You got them Mississippi tubes.
Just because you see
That's right.
PV on it, I found some really cool old tubes. But so it was already kind of more of a mess than I think we realized. Someone my age, born in the late 70s, reading forums, who's reading old guys talking about tubes that I can't afford and I can't use in the context they were to really understand. So I build this idea in my mind of what it is. And then the tubes made for me today. And so maybe the approach to take, instead of trying to sift through a huge lack of information from the past, is just to start now.
Right. Start with brand new.
Keep the record now. So 15, 20 years, when people are pulling old tubes out, they have an idea of what it is and what it can work. Because the truth is, what is a 6L6? That evolved with time. The first one being in the late 30s, and then at some point it's made by different manufacturers to different standards. So today, I can think of a couple different tubes. Some of the Russian tubes, if you were able to pull up the technical data for it, its max voltage rating, its current rating, its transconductance, all these things, it's a photocopy or a Xerox of an old tube sheet from a tongue saw factory in the 60s. Okay.
It's an estimate. It's an estimate of what it would sound like if you built it to spec, right?
Is this the same machinery?
Right.
If it is, it's decades worn out.
Right.
It's certainly not the same metallurgy. It certainly isn't the same people doing it with the same knowledge.
Yeah.
The glass shape looks the same.
Right.
Yeah, it says
Right.
tongue saw on it.
Right.
Right. How much of this really is that?
So to me, what I kept, just when you were talking about not only the history of amps, but then we get into the components that go inside the amps and the history of that. To me, it's kind of like you're on this sort of audio archaeology mission.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Right, to kind of just reconstruct the narrative and to look at all the genus and the species and the development there contained therein as it sort of proliferated over time.
Yeah, and it's
Which
complicated.
I'd imagine it is because,
confusing.
like you're saying, there's so much sketchy information. Then there's this great leap from point A to point G, and and so you're trying to connect the dots any chance you get through rabbit hole searches and everything else like that. I mean, that's fascinating. To think about that, and especially to try to go, well, how much of this past can we resurrect and bring forward to the future? And are we missing a Rosetta Stone moment in the past where we can't decipher what might have been the great technology, but for whatever reason, it just didn't catch on?
And is it even...
Like tape, right?
Yeah.
Like recording to tape.
Yeah.
The different kinds of tape and the ones that are used for different purposes and things like that. There is probably a whole archaeology lesson behind that too. So
Yeah.
Totally. And even if you were somehow able to capture one of the guys who worked at the tape factory, and
too late,
knew
they're
that-
already captured.
Do you even have access to the materials and the things needed to make it? Like
Yeah.
a lot of the materials that go into the metal to make those, can we necessarily get that today? Because are they what we call rare earth metals today?
Right.
Are they at an affordable price? Is this tube going to cost $1,000? Right. So
Yeah.
maybe the way to look at it, and spoiler alert, the way to look at it is to just begin now with a new mindset.
Yeah.
And so I would say I'd almost like for us to just take the labels off the tubes. That JJ6L6, okay? JJ's great because of the few factories, they give us the most technical information.
And they're based out of where?
They're Slovakia or Slavic Republic. I know you're not supposed
Right.
to say one or the other.
Right.
Right.
But
so they're
respect to both.
They're in Europe.
Yeah.
And they give us a lot of information that seems to be pretty accurate. If you're putting these tubes in amps a lot, it seems you can trust it.
Right.
Then you've got some of the Saratov factory, the Sovtek factory, all the brands that come out of there, Tungsol reissue, Mullard reissue, Electro Harmonics,
Right.
the Genelex reissue, that's coming out of the same factory.
Yeah.
We have almost no data from them other than Xeroxes of vintage pieces of paper on tubes that were made sometimes on other continents, right? It's not the same stuff. So let's begin. It says 6550 on it. It says KT77, whatever it says, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's maybe just start coming up with I have an idea for a tube. I think it should be called the 6T9. I'm very juvenile. And I think that if we could start thinking about what is this device made today?
Yeah.
What can we plan on choosing transformer sets around it, the voltages at which to run it,
Right.
how much power can we make from it? And then from there, because that's where it started, it was very functional at first. And then as time went on, we found the finer details that gave us great tone, right?
Yeah.
So start with that. And maybe we'll have to have new names. And then there's some exceptions too, like the Sovtek 5881. That is a unique difference. So that is a Soviet tube made by the Soviets on their own for a 6N3P-E in the Cyrillic letters. They don't say N or P.
What does that mean in English?
It means 9 and pastrami. No, in English, it would be just numbers and letters.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but Mike, I assume it's Mike Matthews, the Soviet Union falls. He goes over there. He's digging through all the stuff. They have tons of these things. Right.
So he's
And
repurposing.
he's experimenting. He's like, oh, wow, this one works in this Fender, and it sounds good, and it's pretty reliable. I'm going to slap 58881 on it because that's in the mind of the people who I want to sell it to.
So let me interrupt on that stream because I think it's important for most people, especially this was news to me because I remember you and I went through this on several amps that you worked on, and that is the interchangeability of tubes relative to that, because there were so many times where we like, well, we could sub it out for this thing, or like sometimes we'd look up a particular tube, and I remember you going, well, there's like 6 sort of replacements, and they're all different tube letters and numbers and everything else like that. I mean, that to me is like so bewildering because as someone who doesn't know anything about electricity and nor have the right to, that doesn't mean anything to me other than like these are interchangeable parts, like Eli Whitney cotton gin kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you can just sub it, like a tire is a tire is a tire kind of a thing. But clearly, each tube, because there's minute differences, can throw off. It's that aggregate marginal gains. You sub a transistor out here and a capacitor there and a tube there, and then suddenly, by the time you get to the output at the speaker,
It's quite different.
yeah.
And the added layer of that is the fact that we're building things that are copies of originals that we might not even have for the purposes of appealing to people who, in 2026, the guys who had real 6L6s are pretty old now. So there's just us on this second or third generation handed down paradigm that's a copy that's not an original, right? We're really getting out here now at this point. So maybe it's time to start over.
Yeah,
Okay?
I mean, a reboot.
So,
if you envision that, I mean, what would it take? What if we were going to start a factory today? Could we afford to do it? I mean, how much would a tube set, retail for? Because you mentioned that when we did have the COVID carnival and there was this huge crunch and the factories were shutting down and everything else like that. I remember when there was a forum, and for those of you who don't, there was a forum that everybody got together, and they were basically saying, should we as American consumers of tubes and in the guitar world, should we lean into electroharmonics and some of the other makers that are associated with making their own tubes? Should we lean into them to try to come up with American means of production and manufacture and distribution? And I guess that happened to some extent, but it was only for hi-fi, and why?
So my understanding is there's a factory in Georgia, Western Electric, I think. I need to check on that. And they do make some tubes, and they were going to step up, increase production. And maybe they did, but they're not tubes that I see in MI, musical instrument equipment.
Okay.
And that makes sense because if you've ever dipped into the hi-fi world, that's big bucks, right? There's significantly higher profit margin, right?
How much is that?
Yeah, when we talk about a preamp for a guitar and a preamp for your turntable, you're talking about a 10x easy multiplier.
And how much of that is like real? Like I thought about this. I was like, what if, because you were building this, I know we're going to kind of derail, but I promise I'll land the plane really quickly. You're building now some of your workflow, and some of your clients are coming to you to say, I want you to build me a tube power amp, not the preamp stage, not like a normal amp, like a Marshall or a Fender or whatever. They're saying, no, I just want a tube power amp. What's the difference between what you're building for guitar players who want a tube-based power amp that they run into a 412 cabinet or whatever, and a hi-fi guy going, I need an amp for my stereo that's going to pump out, some wattage. I mean, electrically speaking,
I think there's not a ton different. Maybe a little bit fewer parts in the MI gear, right? Because we don't have to have as many things to compensate and keep it flat. I will say this, I'm not nearly as knowledgeable in the hi-fi or PA world as I am with the MI gear, right?
Okay.
So I can't say with extreme confidence with that. What I can say is one of the things I do know is there's kind of two philosophies in hi-fi. Is it needs to be an accurate reproduction of the signal down to the, every little part of the wave, or it just has to sound good. Kind of two philosophies, right?
Yeah.
And with MI gear, it's easier said, harder to accomplish, but we're not really trying to reproduce with the MI gear that I'm working with, right? We're trying to produce. And what I mean by that is I'm referencing an Eminence commercial or advertisement I heard of talking about different types of speakers, where are we trying to take the sound as it exists and make it louder
Right.
and not change it? Or are we a part of the identity of
The
the
tone,
sound,
the timbre,
right?
yeah,
Changing. And then what's often overlooked, especially in the world of modelers, I would say is the experience for the artist, right? That's way overlooked of, okay, yeah, this solid state clone of a 65 Fender amp, I AB, Rhett Scholl ABs it with an actual 65, and man, that sucker's close, okay?
Right.
But I've had the privilege to work with some great guitar players, and a part of that is their experience making that happen. The same way the race car engineer I spoke about earlier is, he would say your race car should be easier to drive than your street car,
Yeah.
right? In order to do lap after lap after lap, and then in the moment where you've kind of lost yourself, squeeze another 1/10 of a second out somehow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or find some new phrase or experience to put in a recording.
Yeah.
That's an experience that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
So to come back to what you're saying of what is the difference, I would say there are fewer rules, and we're more worried about the experience. As a listener to a hi-fi, you're a passive participant, right?
Yeah.
But the guitar player is the creator
Yeah.
and an active part of the loop. And so I'm really worried about their experience, right? However, even no matter what I'm saying or what they're saying, I'm usually trying to gather, like look at them or listen to them, or I'm not great at reading people, right? That's not one of the cards I got, but I try to read between the lines of how they're feeling and get them to where they need to be to do their job better, or at least enjoy it more, right?
Yeah.
So, or a gun, you can have two rifles and they both have the same MOA, but one's easier to use and more comfortable. So when you're out hunting or doing whatever you're doing, it's going to be a lot easier to achieve the performance from that rifle if it's more user-friendly. So I guess the answer to your question is the technical differences, I'm not really qualified to say, right?
Okay.
But as far as the experience, I am trying to color it. But I'm kind of in new territory here with making amps for people who are using preamps and modelers, where right now, today, I have to go pick up a cabinet that's sort of a prototype that I'm working on. Where do we draw the line, right? The last cab I chose, after talking to you, I went home and changed one of the speakers out to an EVM 12L clone. The EVM 12L is much closer to a reproducer type speaker. It's more of a linear PA type speaker, right?
Okay.
And I took out more of a vintage 30, which has a lot of voice, a lot of character, a lot of coloration. So I don't really know where I'm going yet. I'm counting on trying to find artists who are open-minded and willing to help me gather that data to find out what is the sweet spot of how much of it, because if it just has to be this linear recreator, we've already got that, right? You can get a Crown Power amp and a PA, but also we can't have too much, like we were talking about the guy plugging his Axe effects into the front of his Bassman reissue. There's too much coloration there. Yeah. What happens, by the way, if you plug a Marshall stack simulator into a Marshall stack? Do they cancel each other out?
Yeah. Well, they just sound like a backwards Marshall.
I think you open a black hole, is what I understand.
It is.
Alarm sum?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I think. I mean, I think it just, you get too much of it. Well, the same thing happens with Kemper and the profiling amplifiers that are out. They have a technology where they profile the preamp and the tone stack and the power amp and the output stage and the speaker, and then they say, well, if you want to do that, and then let's say you've got an amp and it's been modeled, and you're like, cool, I'm going to go do a recording session, and you're not playing it out live. Okay, that's where you go pump the brakes hard, because as soon as you take a modeled amp that's already been recorded with a microphone on a speaker cabinet, that's the complete modeling of the amplifier. And now you're going to go into a recording studio and you're going to take it out through another speaker cabinet. You're going to put another mic in front of it. So it's almost like refried beans. It's like at what point?
How many times can you refry it?
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it sounds worse every time because there's like the photocopies that you mentioned from the schematics, they get worse and worse and worse over time. And it is exactly what happened. I am not a fan of using amp modelers in the studio and recording with them if you're going to try to put it through a physical medium like a speaker and put a microphone in it. It's bit me in the ass every single time without exception. Live, no one cares because most people play in shitty rooms anyway, and live venues are generally not tuned acoustically. So there's a lot of forgiveness just sort of built into the whole the equation, so people can get good tone. But what is good tone if you're playing in a gymnasium?
Yeah,
I mean, all the details going to get, it's going to be like the reverb is just going to be out of control.
It's a great point. And you've told me several stories about Kemper and how you were asked to go out and test them, and you're like, I hate this.
I know. Yep, I did.
So at this point, John, you've worked on probably close to 1,000 amplifiers, whether it's a new build or a retro or a mod or something like that. What's the best reaction that you've gotten from someone when they plugged it in for the first time after you've made it to their specification?
I'll be honest with you. It's typically a comment that I get days or weeks later.
Okay.
Because there's the novelty of new, right? So, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but when the dual Rex, I can't remember the names with the later ones, and they had so much more bass. And you're standing in the showroom like a rock block, and the new model has all this extra energy, and it's shaking your leg. But then you get home, and that kind of wears out, and you realize the older ones had more harmonics, were more musical. Mm-hmm. So I always appreciate any positive feedback. I also appreciate critique, right? Because I know they're being honest with me, and that's going to help me get them closer to where we need to go. Mm-hmm. But it's usually a little bit later, maybe they send me a track, or a lot of times it's not even what's said. It's like if it gets used a lot, right? That is the most concrete evidence to me that me and the player have accomplished something.
Right.
And everybody's looking for that.
So there's no orgasm when someone.
If Christopher Walken came in
and says anything,
John,
this is watch.
You're giving me an orgasm with this amplifier. Yeah.
Have you ever had any weird requests, or maybe a very Nashville type request?
If you want to hear some weird stories, we should go back to being a mechanic. Yeah, because there's some great stories. I'm trying to think of a weird request. Not really. I don't think anything that it would stand out. There were things that are weird electrically to me. I'm not sure how interesting that would be for everybody listening to this podcast. I know Dave Britton would be with me on that. He's a friend and also amp builder, and we get way into the weeds. If you ever have trouble going to sleep, we should record ourselves. You can listen to this boring tech talk. It's super interesting to us.
Well, okay, but I mean, there's got to be people who come in and be like, "Hey, can you build me a Marshall and a Vox and a Fender in one amp?"
I've been lucky in that I think I've managed to avoid a lot of that crowd. I have been lucky enough to work with a lot of working musicians. Yeah. One lesson I learned first in my past life is a great story here in Nashville in a BMW right over at 100 Oaks Mall of, not everyone gets to have a car. Everyone gets to enjoy watching racing. Everyone gets to want to buy a fast car, but not everyone gets to go out and race on a track, and even fewer get to do it a lot and learn and then even compete where you have to have results, right?
Yeah.
And so most of us buying performance parts for our cars, it's a hobby, right? Yeah. And we can't determine the balance of oversteer or understeer on our 93 M5 in the neighborhood. Right. You shouldn't either, right? But you can't. Even Juan Montoya couldn't do that. It's not a controlled environment. It's irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people I learned from that experience as a mechanic who were not professionals, did not have realistic expectations, including myself as a teenager with my car, of what a car can do and what you should expect to trade off performance for comfort, fuel economy. and what is even capable with this car, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the budget.
Right.
And going into this business, I was able to steer more towards professionals who knew they can't get a 300 watt amp that they can turn down to bedroom volume, have beautiful cleans, and have Meshuggah overdrive
Right.
that weighs 2 pounds and never
Right.
breaks. Right? These are things. You ever seen the thing? It's like you want it fast, cheap, or affordable, or
Fast, cheap, and good.
Fast, cheap,
Yeah,
and
It's
good.
about
Pick two.
the rule of threes with film. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you can't have all three.
Yeah.
no
Yeah,
matter
pick
what.
two.
Yeah.
Right. So here we get to pick even fewer. So in the amp world, I've been very lucky to work with people with very reasonable, or, quite frankly, this was a hard thing at first for me to understand, is the percentage of what we're hearing is the person. There are some absolutely phenomenal guitar players I've had the privilege of working with, and it really kind of doesn't even matter what they're using.
Yep.
I hate to say that.
It's true.
here.
We've talked about that
Absolutely.
yesterday.
I
yeah.
want to be important. I want it to be about what I'm doing.
I
But
know.
the truth is, there's always a certain percentage of that with everyone. But with some people, they're so distinct in their style that
It's
it
in
really
there.
does. Or they're blasting it with gain or something. The sound is a broken sound.
Yeah.
Right. So it kind of doesn't matter. So to answer your question of the weirdest stuff that would be a more relatable way, I've avoided a lot of that. Not purposely, maybe by luck or not. It'd be good for war stories, but yeah, a lot of professionals here in Nashville. Very unique
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like Mecca, for especially for guitar players
And even pizza delivery guys.
yes, man.
Seriously.
Right, because they're all guitar
They
players.
are, and the actual guitar players too. I'm not joking about
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I just thought of a really dirty joke, but I won't tell it. So, your level of curiosity and attention to detail and just passion that you bring to it, I think, is unique because I'm probably not alone in your client list where I've brought amps to other repair techs or you need something fixed or whatever, and they were just meat and potatoes, didn't really care, fix this cap, blah blah blah, never asked like, well, what are you looking for, or how can we make this better, or anything else. And I think that you are such a wonderful human being in that way, and it shows in what you bring into the passion of your work, to the point where I bought a British car recently. And John was over, and you got in the car, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't even smell German, like, right? You knew the smell. It was like, if I blindfolded you, you'd be like, well, it's not a BMW or a Mercedes or a Porsche or an Audi. So then you narrowed it down, like. And I think you bring that sort of, for lack of a better descriptor, you bring that smell test to your amp building and what you do when you're working on circuits and when you're making reparations and stuff. I mean, I remember the time that we went through one of the amps, and we went through maybe half a dozen different reverb tanks, just looking for the one that sounded the best.
Oh yeah,
right.
That was a learning experience.
And me too. And it was like, wow, shit, because I could hear that, and I was like, nah, it's too splatty, it's too ringy, and we can't put in
all
EQ.
the same part number.
Yeah, exactly.
Same manufacturer.
Yeah.
Or it came in the same box.
Yeah.
And they all sounded that differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I love that. I think that that's such a fascinating element that you're able to bring and willing to go down those rabbit holes,
Which is
to learn.
sometimes a bad business decision. by the way.
Well,
Yeah.
right, there is that. but short term, I would say, because long term, you have a fan for life, and they're going to recommend their player, their other friends that are players and whatever, and then you get the race car crowd, you get the race car drivers instead of the Formula One fans that buy the cars that they think are going to be like their heroes. You're actually working with the real drivers themselves. So I think in the long run, good business decision.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. I would say, to be devil's avocado, that, kind of like a cab driver. I mean, I can make the direct analogy of being a mechanic is sometimes you don't really care about the device.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that important. You just want to get it fixed. You want to get in and out. You don't want to think about it that much. And there's nothing wrong with that,
True.
right? That's how I am with my toaster. right?
Right.
My toaster just doesn't sound the same as it used to. Can we try some different parts?
But
right?
you're not making a living toasting.
Well, but my point is, maybe some of the techs who are a little more cut and dry.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lid for every pot. You know, there's a right match, and so I totally get, as somebody who's been fixing things my whole life, that that's not always what you're looking for. I just want to get it running so I can sell it, or you know, I'm grumpy because I got to go on Broadway and fight traffic and do this gig and get covered in beer and then go home, right? So I don't care about that, and so I understand where if you can get that can be vocalized, I'll try to be that guy for you.
Right.
And not everybody wants that, and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all.
Good point.
But I do appreciate you saying that, and that is how I feel. I wanted to a fault sometimes of you got to get shit done.
Yeah.
Right, to pay your bills.
Right.
But I do want, because you never know. Like, what if this helps you make something great, or you just never. You see amps years later, and someone else has that amp.
Yeah.
It's meandered around, and then this person obviously really likes it. If they sold it, the other guy must not have connected with them. You know.
I think that you're just the fact that you're just open to serendipity, because, and I think it's a great sutra for everyone in life, because if you think about all of the majority of the greatest inventions of humanity is the direct result of a serendipitous occasion. It was you were planning X, but you ended up getting Y.
Yeah.
Think of the Post-it note. You know, I mean, just for the most trivial example, you can think of penicillin, X-ray machine. I mean, just all kinds of just incredible advancements that we pride ourselves on, and then historically, in retrospect, we look back and whitewash it to the point where we think, no, that's the trajectory that we set out on, and it was this linear path, and it's like bullshit.
Yeah.
It was a chaos ride.
Looking back in time,
yeah,
it
and you
seems
just figured out
carefully planned,
repurposing.
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, so that open-mindedness, I think, is really the key to success. Not just in any field, but also just more teleological in life.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, it was really great getting to know you today.
Thanks for letting
really
me come.
appreciate you coming to the show, being here.
Yeah.
Where can people find you to get some work done? Maybe build an amp, do a mod or something.
Well, the best place right now is Black Tape Amplifiers, either .com or on Instagram. I'm expanding all that. I am more and more pivoting away from repair work as the economy is changing a lot, and there's less room for that, I think. And maybe when the economy stabilizes a little more, there'll be some more. That'll make a little more sense. But
Yeah, and if anybody listening has any NOS tubes, let us know, please.
yeah, if you've got some old tubes, you know, I would say get online, just look at images, look through the glass, look beyond what's written on it, because there's no telling. Look at the metal pieces inside, at the base, the shape of the base, the color of the base, and help you identify. Because I pulled out a tube yesterday that was kind of in a junk pile, and then doing a little research on Google Images, and I realized this was like $110 Kentucky Radio 6S and 7. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
You know,
Wow, it's a nice tube.
and it probably sounds fantastic. It's probably that expensive for a reason.
Yeah.
You might be sitting on a gold mine, Trebek. Like, it might be something great. So learn to, you know, look past the glass and see what's in there and what you've got.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, it's been a hell of a ride. That was a great show. Thank you.
Thank you.
for that.
Thanks
Yeah.
again, John.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Earworm out.
Earworm out.
I am from black tape, going in my road case. Tour date sounds great. Earworm stuck in my mind, can't get it out this time.
Did you hear that?